Well, welcome. Good morning, and welcome to our Sunday morning Outloud podcast, sponsored by On the Path. And we're here with Chuck. It's me and Tommy G. And today's guest is Angel Garcia, who is comes to us in a lot of different ways. We've been together for a long time in terms of being connected, and Angel is a former LA County sheriff and police officer, and has been involved in a lot of different things in a lot of different ways, and we'll talk a little bit about what he's into these days. But his story is very interesting, and I think that it'll be an interesting conversation to have today. And we're really glad to have you on, Angel, and have you with us today. So thanks for coming in and hanging out with us, and we will get to some of the questions here in a second. But tell us how you're doing, man.
Yeah, good, Chuck. Thank you for having me. Just to clarify, it's San Bernardino County Sheriff.
Excuse me, San Bernardino County
Yeah,
Sheriff's. Yeah.
yeah. I don't want that to get confused because then it won't be good. But anyway, I just want to thank you guys for this opportunity, Chuck, Tommy, and kind of like how Chuck said, we've been connected for some time, and I have much love and respect for both you and Tommy. So from the bottom of my heart, you're kind of more like family than a friend. So, and that goes for both of you. So I really appreciate the opportunity to tell my story, and I'm humbled that you guys would choose me to give a little bit about my journey in life here up to this date.
I mean, we think it's super valuable, Angel. I mean, the experiences that you go through, if people can help navigate things similar or different because of you, it makes all this stuff worthwhile. It makes all the patience of the technology and all that stuff worthwhile, because you have some serious wisdom, and otherwise, if we're not your friend, then nobody gets to hear it. So we want you to give as much wisdom, Yoda, as you possibly can. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm all in. I think first of all, I'd like to start off, with the men and women that are currently doing the job. I tip my hat off to them, because the job right now is just, I mean, if I went back and put the reels back, and at this point to say, hey, enter this profession, I'd probably choose another profession to get into, just because of what's going on, the scrutiny that they go through, and then the decisions that you make at one dime of a call, it changes a lot of people's lives. So I just want to give the men and women that are currently wearing the uniform the big shout out and respect. Thank you guys and gals for keeping us all safe at night, and making the decisions that you make day in and day out.
Yeah, that's important thing to acknowledge. There's a lot going on in today's world, and we were fortunate to have my father on to talk a little bit about police work. And it's obviously a different era. He started in, I think, 1961, and it's a completely different situation for guys who then followed in that job, and I think the job became a little harder each time. So we're excited to get to some of your story. But give us a little background, Ange, and tell us a little bit about where you grew up, and family situation, and things like that, to kind of give us a base foundation of where you came from.
Yeah, so no, that's a great question, Chuck. So my background, my grandparents and stuff like that were and their grandparents, were born in East LA when it was Mexico. So I mean, the generations go way deep into East LA, that area right there on Olympic and Soto, right by the Sears Tower. So that's where I grew up. We grew up in a little area called the Wyvenwood Apartments. A gang infested area. Back then, when we grew up, it was a pretty nice area in the '70s. But by time right now, I mean, a big gang called B&E. That's kind of like their territory. So grew up in the Wyvenwood Apartments. Went to Dakota Elementary School right there in that area. When there was an incident that happened that my uncle was involved with. He was involved with the gang in that time, called White Fence, which is a notorious East LA gang. But he lived in B&E, so he would have to, at night when he would come home, he would kind of go through the green belts, and one night he got chased down by some of these hoods from B&E, ran into the apartment. The apartment got shot up. And my mom and dad just had enough. They just said, hey, we need to get out of this. They scraped up enough money to move in down into Norwalk, to get us away from that because it was getting bad. The gang problem was getting bad. So it took that incident for us to move to Norwalk. And, my mom, cleaned houses and they put us through, parochial school down at St. Pius, off of Telegraph in Florence, and we went to school there. We'd walk to school and, my mom would clean houses and my dad was a crane operator at a steel mill. And, the things that I could remember from my childhood is just, having a very disciplined mom and dad, that wanted the best for us. I mean, my mom would break her back and go clean houses and scrape enough cash to put us through elementary school. So the roots, the ethic, uh, um, culture was set aside real early in the beginning. So we went to parochial school. I mean, I couldn't read and I couldn't write. I didn't know my colors, because I came from uh, an East LA education. So, and everyone was so advanced at St. Pius that I had to kind of start from the beginning. So, going back and kind of, you know, having that structure um, at the beginning stages, it kind of set the path for, your high school, your college, and now in adulthood, having that disciplinary, having that, general, 4'9" woman kind of guide you that way, because my dad was working. He was supportive, but my mom, day in and day out, she was the backbone of the operations. So I think, yeah, and Chuck, you could attest to this. I mean, the lady's just a firecracker.
Yeah.
She
There's no doubt.
Yeah,
There's
she's
no
awesome.
doubt. She commands a lot of respect, and she walks in a room. And Angel's got a big family, and a lot of pretty tough people, and people that we all have come to know and have a lot of respect for. But there's no doubt when she walks in the room that she's there. You don't have to see her to know. Everybody responds. I mean, people get on their feet. It's it's
Right.
amazing situation. So obviously she's made that kind of an impact, and yeah, it's a pretty neat to be able to see that kind of love and respect for the matron of the family.
Hey,
yeah,
Angel,
yeah.
my son had an incident when he was growing up, Kyle, where they had to call the police for his stepdad who was acting poorly, and that really was something that stuck in my son's mind moving forward. These guys came in, they handled the business, settled everything down, separated the parties, gave this sense of security, gave this sense of safety. Did and consequently, Kyle spent some time committed to being a cop. And did that happen to you? Do you feel like that's something that happened at the apartments before you guys left? I mean, it takes a special person to go down the law enforcement path, and I'm always interested in the motivation. In fact, I'm not sure there is any motivation to be a cop anymore, which is the sad part. But what was there any situation that happened with you where you glorified those officers?
You know what, Tom? That's a very good question. Very interesting question. I know, um, being in LA, and the green belts, and then I don't know if you've ever been to these apartments down at the Wyvenwood apartments, but they have green belts and then they have sidewalks. So the local neighborhood guys, the local guys from B&E, or the local guys I grew up with that were older than me, they would play, tackle football in the green belts. And what made a difference is one day an LEPD crash unit comes rolling through, and those two officers, they're wearing their jeans with their raid jackets, and they took off their raid jackets, they took off their Sam Browns, they threw them in the back of the trunk. We were little kids, so we weren't playing football with these guys, but they were like, hey, you guys could play in the car, but just don't touch this button. And they would play tackle football with the neighborhood guys. So I think that kind of set the path, you know, later on in life. And then what really made a difference is one day, eighth, ninth grade, wanting to be a thug back in those days. I was writing white fence on stuff and, trying to emulate some of my uncles and stuff like that. And my dad really sat me down as a
Mm.
13, 14-year-old and said, hey, what are you doing? If you're going to be the best at something, then be the best at it. If you want to be a trash man, be the best trash man. If you're going to be a janitor, be the best janitor. If you want to be a gangster, then be the best gangster. Don't be a gangster, be a mobster. you know so or if or what I suggest is that you go down to the sheriff station here in Norwalk and become a police explorer. So I kind of sat down and I put on my big boy pants and I walked down to the sheriff station over at the Norwalk
Yeah.
station, and I
That's
walked
my
in and I says,
neighborhood.
yeah, I says I'd love to be a sheriff explorer, and there was a gentleman by the name of David Honor. He was a explorer lieutenant at the time, and he came up to the front desk and he looked at me and says, come on back, kid, let's talk. And we had a talk. He gave me an application. I filled it out and returned it back to him, and he kind of took me under his belt. And I got involved in that program, and I got really interested in it because it was like a warm reception that they gave me, and it was a bunch of push-ups and sit-ups and running and learning codes and stuff like that. So it was a good program for me to get involved with. The program did wonders for me in my life. you know
My
as
favorite part of that whole story, and people don't understand, my favorite part about the whole story is the crash unit was 100% designed to deal with the guys that they were playing football against. Like it was, okay, we're going to have a arm wrestle here with my enemy, or we're going to fight a half hour later. We're going to put you in jail. That's so
but
amazing.
but it was smart on their end because they knew all the guys. Like, hey, they knew like
That's
Blinky
true.
and Joker, and they knew the families, and they knew that Joker's dad was
Yeah.
Anthony, and they knew Anthony's grandma was Lauren, or they knew everything. So that's like street intel from the get-go, because they knew everything. So if a kid would get busted right in the walls, instead of putting handcuffs on him, they'd grab him by the ear and take him
Yeah.
down to Abuelita's house and say, hey, I caught Junior tagging the wall right here. And Junior would
That's
be
awesome.
kicking and fighting, like, hey, I don't want to
Yeah.
go to Abuelita's house, take my ass to jail.
But
So I
no,
mean,
but there's no cop that's going to expose themselves to harm in 2021. You
yeah,
know, that the
no,
idea that you might take a shot on in the ribs, or take a shot on the bridge of the nose, or dislocate a shoulder from, and maybe they were bigger and stronger than the guys that were than the bangers, but that, to me, that's something that wouldn't happen. To
different times.
set your gun down, it ain't happening. You know.
Yeah, different times, Tommy. Different times. It's
Yeah.
it the it's just evolved so much differently that people are afraid to sneeze on someone else because it's the liability behind it. So times have changed.
Yeah.
Times have changed.
So you grew up in the neighborhood, and you had mentioned that the influence of your uncles was kind of giving you one way to go, and your dad had pulled you aside, and what was the next move for you as you got involved in the Explorers program? Where did that take you?
Yeah, it took me to an Explorer Academy. It took me to the push-ups and push-ups and classroom setting. So it took me into a place where it was a real disciplined regiment. You know, and then shortly after that, I started over at St. Paul. Being introduced to Joe Pena and his staff, and just the way Joe carried himself. Also, that confidence that he exudes. Just that general out in the field, and and then the bond you start creating with some of your St. Paul brothers. That's laid out the foundation. So not only did I have the brotherhood with the Explorer program and that foundation, at the same time I was building the foundation over at St. Paul. So they were kind of overlapping over each other. So that's when I really learned, like, the bonds between brotherhood, the bonds between loyalty, the bonds between taking care of each other, the bonds between looking out for someone's back. Those bonds were laid out. And then I had my family bond at home. So there was a lot of bonding going on, with the Explorer program at St. Paul, at home, and there was a lot of work involved. Then you have to do your homework, and you have to do your chores, and you have to do all that other stuff. So I had a bunch of things going on at the time at a young age. So it kept me busy from uh, you know going down that wrong path.
I think it's interesting, when we're talking that conversation that your father had with you was very difficult by by any situation. And like these are things that parents are worried about all over the place and are having trouble with all over the world. How are you going to talk to your teenage son? How are you going to, throw him the bone? Do you feel like you received it well? Were you respectful, or were you like, fuck this, and this is some bullshit? This old man don't know what he's talking about, or like, how does he doesn't know my life, or how'd that go? I mean, what was your reception to it? I mean, was it the right thing at the right time, or did you like fight it for a minute?
Yeah, my dad's a man of few words. So when he talks, you kind of open up your little antennas go up. So uh, it it's always about respect, and,
Mm,
and you sit there. If you take a tongue lashing, you take a tongue lashing. But he's
right
always
on.
been a calm, cool, and collective guy. And like how he said, hey, these are the different paths you could take, but whatever path you're going to choose, just be the
Yeah,
best at it.
that's
So
interesting.
for me, when I'm sitting down there as a young, 13, 14-year old, I'm really looking deep down inside and saying, hey, you know what? And reflecting back when we lived in East LA in the neighborhood and be like, hey, you know what? It wasn't so bad. These LAPD guys are playing with the neighborhood kids. Those guys are extremely respectful guys that are wearing the badge and the gun. And at that point, I was like, you know what? It wouldn't hurt for me to jump into this Explorer program, because if it works, it works out great. If it didn't work, then I still have that bond over at St. Paul.
That's
But
incredible.
yeah, the lucky thing for me is that David Honor took a chance on me and said, "Hey, yeah," he embraced me, and everything that he said, I would do it, and it worked out well.
It's a funny distinction that some people learn from their family that respect, and some people don't, and some people learn from different aspects of their life. But to have the gang side of things, which, if there's good things that come out of that learning experience, respect for each other is, or respect for your elders and respect for the people that come before you is I mean, that's a great lesson to learn from all those different aspects of things. And obviously it led you down a path to be able to have that be
Yeah.
part of your DNA and who you are, and stuff. And so David Honor was obviously a big influence on you. What was that like? I mean, what was he doing for you, and what kind of things did he teach you?
David Honor, his grandfather was a police chief over at Compton PD, back in Compton, back in the days when it was Compton PD. So just the in so he came from like a background of police officers in his family, and which I didn't. So he taught me that. He taught me that portion of taking care of each other. He taught me that portion of just being very strategic with what you do. And then he embraced me. I would go up with him up to their cabin up in Cabazon. I would
Mm.
shoot with them. So it was a awesome bond that I had with David. And I haven't spoken to him in a while, but I mean, I saw him on TV not too long ago, and I was like, hey, there's David. He's working a high profile unit for the sheriff's department. So it's just his leadership, the bond that we had with each other, and then the support that I would get from him just made a whole difference in the trajectory that I went to in my profession.
I mean, by the time I met you, Angel, by the time, I guess 2 years later, by the time you were a junior, though, I mean, your path was set. By the time, from eighth grade to your junior year, now you were going to be a police officer. Law enforcement was your career. And what a powerful situation. It sounds like you're going to have to make a phone call tonight
To
to,
David, yeah,
yeah.
I got to reach out to David and thank him, right?
Well, and probably the 10 other people that we're going to talk about today
Yeah,
as,
no
as
kidding. You're going to have
influences
long.
as well. But how was that high school experience, then being involved in the sheriff's program, and then going to high school and playing ball and doing all that kind of stuff? How did that start to integrate itself? Again, pushing you toward that career.
It was great. It was a lot of work. It took a lot of energy, but every minute and every hour of the day was filled with something. So it kept me busy. I had a bunch of energy. Um, so I would go to the football practice, and then after practice I would on I think it was Wednesdays and Fridays we would have meetings at the sheriff station. So it was like taking one cap off, putting another cap on, and moving on. So a lot of cap switching. Sometimes you'd play the chief and sometimes you play the Indian. But it kept me busy and it kept me going. And at St. Paul, um, all my friends knew that I was involved with that program, so they were pretty receptive. And one of the incidents, I'll tell you a quick story. Mickey Foster and me, Mickey had this slick black Chrysler Plymouth car. It was all decked out. I think we were sophomores, and going into our junior year, and we finished with practice one night, and we dropped off Albert Barunda right there in South Side Whittier. So we're driving to my house, and we get pulled over by the police. You know, uh, so they pull us out of the car and they start searching us. And while they're searching us, one of the train officers looked over and said, "Angel," because we have shaved heads at St. Paul.
Oh yeah.
You know, and we're driving through the neighborhood of South Side. So we get pulled over, we get hemmed up, and one of the officers that I went on the ride along, he says, "Angel," and he said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Well, I was letting you do your thing." He's like,
Yeah.
"Get in the car, get out of here. These are good kids. Like, send them on their way." But that was just a quick story. But if I wasn't involved, maybe with that Explorer program, maybe it would have got a little bit more deeper. So
Angel, I
that,
had the exact same experience. I got pulled over because I had a shaved head in 1986. Like it was not a cool thing. A carload of people after a football game, and get this, we came home, showered, we're in our blazers. We got the crazy blazer with the logo on there and all this stuff, and we get pulled over.
uh-huh.
And they're sitting us on the curb with our blazers on, thinking we're I'm like, I don't know what gang you think we're in, but I don't know when they're wearing blazers. Oh, my mom was bitter. My mom she called the watch commander. "What are you guys doing? Rang up my son." And oh man. So I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah,
you.
that's interesting because I never had that happen to me
Yeah,
before.
you're the opposite.
No, my friends tell the stories all the time about, Chuck would go, "Yeah, my dad's a police officer, a sergeant in LAPD," and then there would be conversation, and then they would come back and go home, get
Yeah.
off the road, get out of here,
Yeah.
and that was our little get out of jail card free. But yeah, there's no doubt that being involved and again showing a little bit of respect and again that natural, again the way we were all brought up, that there's a certain way that you interact with adults and you see the way things go nowadays and there's no wonder there's bad things that happen, to fight the police on every single level every single time, and the disrespect and the really rude and nasty behavior that policemen have to deal with. It's no wonder there's so many bad things going on. And back in the day, we learned. My dad talked about when we were on the podcast with him. He talked about back in the day it was simple. The criminals knew the way the game was played. We knew the way the game was played. You run from the cops, you got a beating. You wanted to fight, we fought, and the neighborhood guys would go, "Dumbass, what'd you think was going to happen if you fucked with the police?" And there was a certain honor to all that, and there was rules and the way it went. For again, if you were going to be a criminal, you knew the way it was going to go. But it's just changed a lot, and things are a lot different nowadays, and it's a shame. But so you finished high school and started to get involved in the process. What tell us a little bit about how that all went down and how you became a police officer and where you started out and all those good things.
Yeah, so I finished high school and great high school experience with and I want to get back to that a little bit because Miguel Olmedo, the Chuck Willigs, the Ed Acuñas, the different characters on your staff, really set uh, a cornerstone of the respect and the discipline. And Miguel was my personal coach, so it was like a whole different level. So it was like having a dad on the football field that you respected, and then when he walked with you needed to respect that guy. So just having him as our personal coach, myself and Steve and Richard and John, us being the core linebackers, you really felt like, hey, you know what, we need to elevate our game also as players.
Yeah.
So having that respect for Miguel, just when he speaks, even now when we had dinner not too long, almost 2 years now, he came down to the house and the guys were here, but just to hear his voice here at my house, I had like, like the hair stood up on the back of my neck, because I'm like, man, now I'm talking to this man that I love and respect here at my house, and now I could, cater to him and feed him and give back, and tell some of the stories of my life that we've been so disconnected for 20 years. So I just want to give Miguel and Chuck Willigs in life. I mean, I remember going down the halls and just hearing Chuck's voice, and like I would like jump a little bit, just to hear that hey, just to hear that
Colleen
voice.
asked me when we were first dating. What scares you? And I'm trying to be a smart ass. I'm not trying to say, money or ghosts or spiders. I said, what scares me is when Coach Omedo calls a defensive timeout and walks to the huddle from the sideline. Like I put my head down. Like I never put my head down on the field. I was like, oh man, here we go. And he was awesome. I mean, it wasn't like he was belittling us. He wouldn't come in and call us names, but you just knew you were going to get it right in the chin, and we were going to be better for it. Almost every time. Oh, Eric, he's not calling a timeout. Come on, guys.
Well, the funny part of that is that you guys were, were students and players, and
Yeah.
obviously we were coaches, but it's the same way we responded to him as well. And there were some pretty tough dudes on that staff, and
Yeah.
over the course of those 4 years, and men that you just don't mess with, because those guys are real dudes. But he would walk into the room with that same, we were talking about your mom, and with that same kind of respect.
Yes.
And grown men who weren't afraid of much, would stand at attention for him. He garnered that kind of respect, and still does, because
Absolutely.
he's one of those salt of the earth guys that that he lives his life exactly how you hope that your own kids will grow up, and those kind of things. And I'll tell a quick story too. Miguel Almeida was, I'm going to say Miguel was 6 foot or 6'1" or whatever, 280 pounds. And, and he was a power lifter and soft spoken, quiet, never really, again, outside of the football field, wasn't a scream and yell guy, wasn't a loud, boastful guy in any way, shape, or form. Very humble and very mellow. But we would torture him, in ways that we didn't know we were torturing him. We were torturing each other, and it got annoying. And he put up with it, I think, because, he liked a little bit of the way we operated. But he came in the room one day and said something, and I said something smart ass to him. And he turned around and grabbed me, reached down between my legs and over my shoulder, and picked me up and slammed me down on the big table in the coach's office. Boom. And everybody just froze, and nobody, you could hear a pin drop, and I looked up at him like, and he looked down at me, turned around, and he walked away. And I kind of got up and straightened up all the papers on the table, and later on talked to him and said, sorry, you guys, he was that kind of guy. He just never, ever exploded in an uncontrolled fashion. And he came back in the room and said, hey, I'm sorry. And I said, nah, don't worry about it, Coach. I deserved it. And I'll be a little more aware of myself. But what a monster of a man with the the teddy bear kind of approach. And again, I don't know anybody that knows him well that doesn't have the utmost respect for him. And again, it's kind of a neat thing to be able to talk about that here.
Yeah.
Because we all have had that experience with a man that again was kind of eventually became our peers, and we were close enough to him to be able to have those conversations and stuff. But fun stuff and neat stories to hear. So I'm going to take it then that your high school days was a positive thing for you, and I know that there was some adversity came with getting injured and doing some things like that created a situation. But how did that all end up?
Yeah, you know what, that adversity, and all along, through life, and this is going to lead up to when I worked over at the jail in a high profile unit at the jail, is that, you know, getting injured and going through an injury and having that time off to reflect at home while you know that your uh, peers and classmates and fellow swordsmen are at school practicing. I was at home, you know, in a cast, and all I could do was go out to my backyard and lift weights. And I started lifting weights, it seemed like, every 3 hours I was out in the back, eating burritos and lifting weights. So I got real big. I got real big as a youngster. I got real big because I was hitting the weights, you know, real bad. I mean, as a freshman, I was lifting 315 pounds. So I think that time gave me the time to reflect on saying, hey, you know what, I'm not going to let this stop me. I want to, I want to have a sword. I want to play on that field. So that's where I really got kind of like buckled down and said, hey, I'm going to make this happen. I mean, I'm not a very big man, I'm 5 foot nothing, but inside of the brain is such a powerful uh, a muscle, you know, and
Amen.
I made it up in my mind that I'm gonna play. I mean, I remember, growing up as a kid, we'd go down to St. Paul and we'd see Matt play and we'd see some of Tom Gordon play, and I'd be like, man, that just inspired me just to get out there and grind it out. And so when I came back with vengeance. If I wasn't gonna be the fastest and if I wasn't gonna be this, at least I'd be the hardest hitter on the team. So I got into that mindset, kind of like that Ronnie Lott mentality, that I was going to be the hardest hitter, and that's all I went in. I went balls in to just smack people, rattle cages, and that's what I became. It's just like a headhunter. That's what I wanted to do. And so the funny thing about that is that off the field, like I would leave that back back on the field. When I was on the field, my parents were paying some money with the help of Father Gallagher because we didn't have enough money for school. So Father Gallagher kind of structured a payment for my mother for us to send us to school. So um, that's like a backstory to that. My we really wanted to go to St. Paul. We didn't have the money to go there. My mom went down and talked to the father and said they worked out a payment program where we could go to school. Miguel got involved with that too. So myself and some of the other guys on the team, we would do things around the school just to kind of make up for that monies. So it was I mean, sometimes we didn't even have enough money to put cleats on or pay for stuff, and Miguel would take care of it, and the rest of the coaching staff because we really wanted to play. I remember sitting down and talking to Rich Garcia. I mean, Rich Gonzalez, and Rich was like, "Man, how are we going to do this?" And he's like, "Well, let's Miguel will figure it out. Coach Almeida will figure it out. He'll make it happen."
Wow.
So I'm grateful, for people taking a chance on me, and for being humble enough to say, hey, you know what, a lot of people are believing in us, so I got to produce. I got to buckle down and I got to produce, and
It's interesting.
yeah, and I worked really hard. As a young kid, to play with some of these monsters from Fontana and Loyola, going up against Robert Loya and Hadawals, just I mean these guys are going to USC and I'm playing on one leg, and just smacking them. But later on in life, and we went to the finals and lost against Esperanza. We went back to St. Paul and seeing Mike McClyman and all the the Robert Loyas of the world and some of the other guys from Fontana, show up at St. Paul after the game, and we had some time to chat, one on one, and him just saying, "Hey, Angel, much respect for you. You when we played against you guys, you're probably one of the hardest hitters that I've ever faced." Was
That's
that
awesome.
that at me as a young kid, that was gratifying enough where it was like, hey, you know what? It solidified my position. It solidified my being there at St. Paul. That what, I got everything that I wanted to get out of St. Paul. I got the discipline in school, being on honor roll and stuff like that. because I wasn't the best learner because of my East LA education, and the foundation of my education started off kind of shaky, but it took all that time, to get to that level as a senior in high school where, you know, my studies were in place. And I think a lot of people, they oversee that. It's kind of like, yeah, it's great to play football. And, Coach Almeida said it best. I still have his tape and I listen to it all the time. It's that adversity. It's that, some of us aren't going to go to the next level. So, you know, just what you're going to do, just be the best at it, have that adversity. And remember when you're 0-3-1, you know, that you guys did it, that you guys won every single game and you guys made it. So it's possible, it's possible in life to fight and get through whatever you're going to get through. And Chuck, we've been in some deep fights in life and against, other people. And when you're up against the wall and you're fighting, you're like, who do you want next to you? Who do you want? A lot of people have that, especially at St. Paul, that frame of thought, like the Chuck Willigs, the Darth Vader, and Angels this, and all these guys are all these like misconception things, when all these guys are great guys and you should embrace
Yeah,
these guys because
it's a great point.
they have a lot to give you. They have a lot of wisdom. But if you embrace these type of guys, like, don't be afraid of them. Like, why are you afraid of a Chuck Willig or Angel Garcia or stuff? Embrace these guys. Joe Ledesma. I'll bring up Joe Ledesma. Because I mean, embrace the guys. Sit down and talk to them. Have them talk to your kids and have them listen to that wisdom. We're not going to guide your kids in the wrong direction. It's about hard work. It's about discipline. It's about having that frame of mind that when when you're down and out, get back up, dust yourself off, and get back in the game. We all make mistakes in life. We're not perfect, and if someone's going to sit there and say, "Hey, you know what? I'm absolutely perfect and I don't do mistakes," then it's a crock of shit. Like, dust yourself off and move on. If you get yourself in a pickle, then reach out to your support team. I'm always here to say, hey, you got yourself in this little pickle. I've been in the same situation. This is what we're going to do to get out of the situation. So um, I just wanted to bring up that point because I think nowadays it takes a lot of hard work, and that adversity of being disciplined, the instant gratification, you're not entitled to anything in life. You're not entitled, like, you got to work for it. A lot of people kind of sit back and say, well, Angel, you have this big house and you have these fancy cars. I don't give two shits about a big house. I don't give two shits about a car. I've had it all. I've had it, big houses, fancy dinners. All that doesn't mean anything to me without a support team, without a Chuck Willick saying, hey, I'm down for you. When do you want me there?
Right.
Or a Richard Gonzalez or a Mickey Foster or a Steve McGee saying, hey, we're your support team. What do you need? When do you need us? Henry Sanchez, people like that you have as your support team, um, means a whole lot in life, moving forward.
For sure. And the funny part about it is that it becomes a cyclical thing because we learned from you guys and we grew up and we, were older and wiser and smarter. And so there was this give and take kind of thing. The things that I learned from the players that I coached is almost as invaluable as the things that I learned from the coaches that coached me. And
Yeah.
the one thing that I know for sure is that we're not supposed to completely understand until we mature and grow up and understand certain things. So, if you don't keep open to those things, you miss a lot of really great connections. And we're all so grateful to have those generational connections that have proven themselves over and over and over again. And obviously, there's we all had connection in that form and fashion as we've stayed connected in some form to be able to know how much you know how much we've helped each other across the board. So it's really it's an amazing part of life.
Can I
Hey,
ask you?
Chuck, yeah, yeah, go ahead, Tommy.
I don't want to get too far away from this point because you really hit me right in the forehead a little while ago, especially connecting to today's times. You mentioned that you carried the fact that you got some help from the school financially. I had the exact same experience. My not only my mom but my extended family. Ricky Valenzuela, all these guys throwing in for me. believing in me, allowing me to participate at St. Paul. So, because I was a public school kid. Fascinating. So we both, it seems like we both carried that with us, a little mini burden, which is fine. Seemed to work out well, kept us motivated, kept us on the right track. And we have today a situation where kids are being bought for sports. I don't know what goes on at Modern Day or serve out any of these big schools across the country, but I'm assuming that there's some financial help. I'm assuming that a kid's not going to drive all the way from South Central to Santa Ana Modern Day because he wants to and because he's got a bunch of money to do that. Um, so if we can just assume that there's help out there, even St. Paul has built-in scholarships. Why aren't the kids? What's happening? Why aren't they feeling the same way as us? Because they're feeling entitled. They're feeling like hot shots. They're feeling their heads are explode. You know, that money made my head get smaller. It made me strive for something higher. What do you think's the difference between us getting scholarship money and the kids that are getting scholarship money today that are acting like jackasses on social media, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, my opinion, Tommy, it's just that, nowadays, everything's moving so fast.
Mm,
Life is just moving so quickly. So you have a young kid that you're saying, hey, you're putting him on a pedestal, and you're like, hey, you're the next guy that's going to go to Clemson Tide, or is going to go to USC, be a Trojan. They're getting all these things put in their head. Like you need, and like I said, they're putting them on a pedestal. Because they're already telling them, hey, you're going to go to the next level. Not only that, but
mm.
you're going to be a number one draft pick. So there's no time to reflect back and saying, hey, you know what? And I can't speak for each and one of these kids, but I just think, Tommy, the times are just different. They're different times. And back then, we'd be able
Just so you
to sit
know,
down and reflect.
nobody knew that I was on scholarship. I didn't go around telling everybody, yeah, man, I got some money. I was like, I'm not going to say embarrassed. By no means was I embarrassed, but I felt an obligation. And I think that's a positive thing for all of our children, for all the kids we run into. You got to have an obligation to fulfill, don't you? It's not about you,
Yeah,
it's about us.
yeah, absolutely, Tom. And I mean, the bottom line is that I mean, look where we came from. I mean, I should have probably gone to Garfield High School and played as a bulldog. But you know, due to that situation of the shooting at the apartment, that led us to Norwalk.
Right.
And wanting to go to the schools and seeing your parents' face, kind of like, hey, what are we gonna do? We don't have enough money to send these kids to
Same.
St. Paul,
Same. Yeah.
and having that 4 foot nothing mom go down there, as a general and work out a deal with these men means a lot. So, I mean, the whole deal with the new generation, that whole entitlement thing, like they're owed, they need a, they want
Yeah.
instant gratification. They want to be rolling in the benzo. They want to be having all the gold chains and stuff like that. I mean, that's all fine and dandy. But when you do find that kid that's humble and it's kind and it's thankful and that's the kind of kid that's going to be like, hey, that's the diamond in the rough right there. That's the guy that you need
Mm.
to, because he doesn't think he's all that. He's just playing hard and he's just doing what he's told. Because I mean they're young minds. So whatever
That's interesting.
people are putting in their minds, that's what they're going to conform to. That's what they're going to get to. I'll tell you, we go back, uh, how we were talking about earlier about making connections, about long time, relationships that you build. Some of these relationships that you build, that, I mean, some of these relationships, 35 years,
Yes.
25 years that I've been building. But the foundation was started 20 years ago, was started 30 years ago. So the foundation I have with you, that I have with Chuck Willig, that I have with some of these people in life, and it's not just about football, and it's not just about, you know, what you do in life, but I'll give you a quick story. Joe Ledesma, real early in life, so we get out and I become a cop and I'm working as a cop, and Joe Ledesma goes to chef school and he becomes a chef and he has a job over in Las Vegas at Charlie Palmer. So I would have 4 days off as a cop, and Joe would be like, "Hey, come and visit me. Come to the restaurant." And I said, "Hey, Joe, I'm living off of peanuts. I can't afford to go eat a place like Charlie Palmer's." And he's like, hey, just come down. So I would drive down there, and I would sit at the bar, and the bartender, his name is Tommy, he's still there. He's still there. He's a
That's
he's
cool.
a dude from like Brooklyn, New York, he's a Boricua. So it's a fascinating story. So I get there and I'm sitting down, and Tommy looks over at me and he's like, hey, sit down. Like, what do you want to drink? And like, I have like $200 in my pocket, and that's supposed to last me like 4 days in Vegas. So I'm like, hey, can I have a glass of water with ice? And he looks over at me, and then Joe comes out at the time, and he's like, what's wrong with your East LA friends, Joe? He's asking for a glass of water. We don't do that. So he brings me out a drink and he sets it down, and uh, Joe comes out, and he gives me a big hug, and he's like, hey, thanks for coming down. He's like, I'm busy in the back. But so every single time Joe would make a plate, he would make a little bit of extra, and he would like slide it. He would slide it my way. Hey, try this, try that. So the whole night I'm talking to Tommy, and I'm eating like the leftover foods or whatever that he's making. So um, there was a guy named Lalo, you know, and that was kind of one of Joe's sous chefs, and I met him there, and so Joe came over, great times in Vegas that we had. He came over years later, and they opened up a Charlie Palmer's at South Coast Plaza, and Joe lived with me for a few years and stuff like that. And then Joe went different directions from Charlie Palmer's and stuff like that. But years later, I mean, we're talking 10 years later, 15 years later, me and Christina for my birthday, we go up to Vegas and we go have dinner at Charlie Palmer's. Um, I'm sorry, it wasn't Christina. Let me take that back. So we go to Vegas for Eddie's birthday, my brother Eddie's birthday, and he's flying in, and I have two of my compadres with me. So we get to Charlie Palmer's, and we walk into Charlie Palmer's, and I mean, we're talking 15 years later. I look over to my right at the bar area, and Tommy's still there. So it's like it never like time like didn't change. So I went up to Tommy and gave him a hug, and he's like, hey, where you been, dude? And I said, hey, Tommy, when you get a chance, come on over. I'd love to talk to you and introduce you to some of my friends and my brother. So Tommy's like, yeah, hey, give me a sec. And so we sat down and stuff like that. And so Tommy comes over, I introduce him to the fellas, and stuff like that. And he's like, hey, so how you been and stuff like that? I said, I've been doing good, Tommy. I says, hey, I wanted to give you some news. And he's like, yeah, what's up? And I said, hey, uh I don't know if you heard, but Joe Ledesma passed away. And like a blank look in his face came about, and he's just like, you're shitting me. And I said, no, Tommy, how you? So he asked how he passed away, and I kind of informed him of that. And he was like, man, me and my wife were talking about him 3 weeks ago. We were telling a great story about him, and I was going to reach out to him. So Tommy's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to bring out some drinks, some shots on behalf of Joe and stuff like that. So he came out and he brought some shots out, and we started drinking and stuff like that. But a fascinating thing, he went to the back house, and told Lalo. So Lalo, back in the days with Joe, was like a sous chef. Now he's the executive chef. So he told Lalo, and Lalo comes out, and I recognize his face, and Lalo's like, hey, you remember me? I said, yeah, what's up, Lalo? And he's like, hey, I'm the executive chef now here. So we big hug. I told him about Joe, but the whole night he's like, hey, we're gonna make this a magical night. So the whole back house, the waiters, Jimmy, waiter Jimmy, he's been there as long as those guys have been there. So we talked about Joe, so it was a magical night. I mean, we sat there for 5 hours and had dinner and drinks and told stories about Joe Ledesma. But um, you know, Joe just made such a big impact in my life. Just as a person. We're not even talking about players. We're talking about just a person and how he was, and just how big of a of a life and of a spirit that he was. Just it just made things amazing. So
Let's be
uh,
fair. There's a couple
that
times he
evening.
made an impact on your ear hole, coming down blocking. He was a hell of a lineman.
Yeah,
Ange, he was a hell
absolutely.
of a lineman,
He
man.
was a hell of a life, and he should be in the Hall of Fame, just to let you know. So,
He should be in the
uh,
Hall of Fame.
but the whole point to that story is that just the foundations, I mean, those relationships that were started, 15, 20 years ago, they'll follow you throughout life. So the relationships that I'm making now will send me into my 50s and 60s. So I talk to Lalo all the time now. We text back and forth. Every time I'm in Vegas, I go down to Charlie Palmer's, and me and Christina have dinner. And so it's just a magical place. It's just, in my heart, every time I go down there, I think about my good friend Joe Ledesma, and he's still in my heart, and he'll probably be in my heart for the rest of my life.
Yeah, for sure. And
That's
they,
beautiful.
those are the kind of personalities that impact us all. This conversation started with, the self gratification of the youth and the way kids are. We were all really fortunate to grow up with a foundation that we didn't necessarily ask for it. We were lucky, and we learned things back then that have sustained us in terms of who are the people that you really care about, and who are the people that, and how do you act in your life to gravitate toward those kind of people. And I think that we're fortunate that background has allowed us to be able to meet and become involved and have developed friendships with people that are like-minded and that have that kind of a feeling about that humbleness and that the respect. And I think it's lent, me being the elder statesman in this conversation, I'm blessed with a lot of people in my life who are a lot more like me than they are different. And they might have started out really different, and those kind of differences seem to attract, with conversations and with, arguments and debates and those kind of things. But the respect is what's left. And to be able to know that we have a long list of people, or at least a good list of people that we know have our backs and we know are there for us, that's something that a lot of people don't have. And
Right.
you talk about the kids that are self-gratification, that comes from way too much information. The internet and those kind of things have given, and I don't blame the kids. They have been grown up with access to everything that they need to know and want. And so, the humbleness of why can't I have those things is a little bit different, than it was whenever we were kids. And so we're lucky, and I'm glad to have you talk a little bit about Joe. And you know Joe and I have had our banging heads of philosophies of life, and good and bad. But it's one of those things where when he was struggling, I was able to not take it personally,
Yeah.
but remain stable, in his life as best I could. And when I was struggling, he was never, an adversary. He was always a friend. And
Yeah.
it took the egos out of it, so it became about each other and our needs rather than about my own personal needs. And that's such a neat situation. We've all had that with each other and over the time. But I appreciate you sharing those stories.
Hey
I
Chuck,
love this deal.
give me 1 minute. I gotta plug this thing because this thing is dying. Hold on, give me 1 sec.
Right.
The thing is, Chuck, is I'm sitting here and I keep hearing whenever there's a success story, or whenever there's a victory in Angel's story, it centers around having the respect, or looking at the respect side of things. Like, even when he's talking about the gang situation, which could have went very, very wrong, he didn't take the wrong part of the gang thing. He took the respect part of the gang thing. And it's so fascinating to me. And then he took his the way he talks about his parents' respect, the way he talks about it, Coach Pena, the way he talks about Coach Amado, the way he talks about Coach Willick. It's like, if you're gonna, if you're gonna play one string, you play the respect string. It seems like it pays off better than the house. Like, that's unbelievable. He treats the bartender with respect. He treats the sous chef with respect. 10 years later, the payoff. You know,
Yeah,
that's
there's no
fascinating to
doubt.
me. It's
Yeah, and I think that comes from, being involved in having good mentors and good
yeah,
coaches and good people around you. And I mean, I know significant amount of people that had really rough, tough growing up with their situations at home, that still grew into those people based on their,
right.
again, you know sports is kind of that
Yeah.
great equalizer where you learn from coaches how to play the game right and the respect that you need to have to play the game. It's a great, we talk about it all the time. Football is a great metaphor for life, and there's
Yeah.
no doubt about it. You can see it in the way people
Right.
respond. And the other thing is the thing that is really I think a really interesting thing to me, and I'd love for us. You should write this down, Tommy, so we can talk about this in our next coach's corner.
Okay.
'Cause I can't find a pen,
No, I got you.
but there's that aspect of there are a lot of kids out there like you and I and Angel that have that respect, that show that respect, that are those kind of kids. They just don't. They're 1/100th of the story that we get inundated with on social media and those kind of things. The loud, the extravagant, the boisterous, the the bad things that happen. That's what gets the news. That's what gets people to pay attention. And so if you're a kid like us who grew up when we weren't inundated with all that information, the individual people that were in our lives were the major impacts. Well, now kids are impacted by people they don't know.
Right.
They're impacted by ways that they don't know whether that's good or bad. I had, I've as a coach in this era, I've had to teach a lot of kids that you're wrong. What you're seeing everybody say is good is not good, and here's why. And you're able to, if those were major teaching moments, but it happened all the time because they're getting so much information from so many different places. And then as a child an adolescent, you're stuck with deciding whether that's good or bad.
Right.
You're stuck with deciding whether I like that or not. And what do you like? You like the things that make you excited. And when those things are coming at you and the guy's doing, 9,000 dances and telling me and my chest, and that becomes exciting. So you think, well, that's a good way. And unless
Good
you're
call.
taught differently, that becomes who you are. And it's, like I said, we were fortunate to grow up a little bit differently, and then had a lot of mentors along the way that
Right.
slapped that shit right out of us. There was no room to be
and I think a lot of people just they don't reflect back on, what are you doing when people aren't looking.
Yeah.
When people
Character.
are looking, when people are looking, hey, you're doing the push-ups, you're sprinting. But it's, for me, it's the time when people aren't looking, like, what are you doing? And for me, it would be, going home or waking up super early and going for a run, or coming home and working out, waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and doing that. And I think for me, that work ethic, and when I want to say is work ethic, putting in the work when no one's looking. For me, it meant, hey, waking up early, because I wasn't the biggest, I wasn't the fastest, I wasn't the smartest, I wasn't all those things. So I
The
had to
secret
work
is it
double.
empowers you, though, doesn't it? And the secret is it makes you stronger,
It makes you stronger. But
from the
like
inside out.
like I started in the beginning, the mind, the brain is a powerful muscle.
Yeah.
So I mean, even when you got the shit kicked out of you and you're all beat up and you're like, man, I don't want to do this. Like, my head hurts, my muscles hurts. It's like the next day you're back at it and you're putting your helmet on and you're going back and you're grinding. And that's the same thing with life. Yeah, I'm getting my ass kicked. I'm getting my ass kicked with bills. I'm getting my ass kicked with phone calls. I'm getting my ass kicked at work. I'm getting my ass kicked with emails. I'm getting my ass kicked. But if you prepare yourself, day in and day out, and putting in that work ethic, when no one's looking, then you're going to be successful at what you do.
Yeah.
Repetitious is the key, and polishing yourself is the key. Not only in life, but also, like, with your family and with your friends. If I never call you out of the blues and be like, hey, Tommy, I need a favor, and you're like, I haven't talked to you in 3 years, like, where
Who's
you been?
this? Who's
Yeah,
this?
who's this? So
I really love that. We were talking when you were gone. I always use the analogy of the guitar. I said, I got one string. I told my son, I got one string on my guitar. I don't have six. I got one, but I play the shit out of that one string, and it's had success. And for you, and I know you have more than one string. Don't kid yourself. But your one string that we're hearing in this interview is that respect. Every time you had a 50-50, you chose respect, and it worked. It seems like it worked every time, even in the bad situation or the good situation, it worked. You have a 10-year, a 20-year relationship with the bartender because you have mutual respect, and that makes your time better when you go to Vegas and when he comes to LA. I just love that. I mean, that's the default answer. The default
Right.
answer is start with respect, give everybody respect, assume everybody deserves respect, and if they take it away from you, okay, then they've cut their own throat. But it's not
That's a
going to be
different
because of
story.
you. Is
You
that
know,
right?
Right.
we had a conversation not too long ago, Ange, and one of the things that is a kind of a staple of the way that I explain it is you know, people go, well, not everybody deserves respect, and that's not true to me. Everybody deserves respect, but the levels of respect is what you earn. You know, you if you start with respect, then you got a chance of getting respect back, and then and developing a mutual respect for each other. If you start with disrespect, it's really hard to get that back in
Yeah.
terms of initial impressions. And so you build the levels of respect, and it grows, and you become more able to respect people at a higher level. But you know, that's a great thing, and you've always preached that, and that's
Yes,
always
sir.
been you know, something. One of the things that I learned from Angel and from Henry Sanchez, and you know, some of those guys is you know, they always said sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. To anybody, everybody. Well, I tell you what, I back the first time I started having that conversation with you, Angel, I've used that in my life, and I never did before. But it has changed the way people respond to me in a million ways, and people look at me kind of funny from time to time. And it's been so many years now that it kind of, you know, I kind of pretend like it's my own thought when it wasn't really. It was a
Stolen.
learned thought,
Stolen.
but I'm able to explain that to people that's just how you start. Make people feel comfortable and respected, and they will have some sense of responding to that respect to you. And it's a great way to
They have an
build relationships,
obligation.
because
They
people
have
are
an obligation.
people are scared. You know, people are afraid to open up and let down their hair, and and give people an opportunity. And it's a great way. It's like I said, it's something that I learned from you guys, that you know, there was that way of speaking that I went, wow, that's real. It's powerful. You know.
It is very powerful, and you know, and a key factor to that is you know, a thank you, yes ma'am, yes sir, I appreciate you. You know, a waiter brings you something out, hey, thank you very much. You know, someone brings something out to you, I appreciate you. You know, I was looking at a Subway commercial the other day, and it was Marshall Lynch. You know, and he's coming rolling in a tire, and the Subway guy's bringing out his sandwich. You know, and he says, hey, I appreciate you. You know, the guy's bringing him out of Subway, and he's saying, hey, I appreciate you. But it just reflected back. You know, and I'll give you a great story. You know, just working in the jail in a high powered unit, you know, that whole respect thing, you know, like I said, the way you carry yourself. I'm not a very big man, you know, um, but the way I carried myself in the jail, you know, I was very fortunate enough for some of my uh, uh, leadership there at the jail to uh, to put me in this high power unit. You know, it was the only high power unit over at West Valley. You know, and they were
Meaning these were the toughest guys. Is that what that means? High powered unit.
meaning
These
these
were
were
the
the most
toughest.
these were the most dangerous
Hmm.
cats, you know, that were walking, you know, there at the jail. So these guys are like, you know, made Mexican mafia members, made we at that time we had the Aryan Brotherhood that were coming down
Mm.
for a Rico trial. So half of them were going to the federal courthouse in Santa Ana, and the other half were going to downtown LA for their federal RICO trial. So we housed them there at West Valley, and you know, one of the things that I learned real quick is when you're in, you know, and like I said, you know, I knew in the conversation it was going to reflect back to this, but I learned so much. You know, I mean, I dealt with those guys for close to, you know, 3 years, you know, day in and day out, and you're working 12, 15-hour shifts at the jail, you know, but you learn that it's a different culture, it's a different mentality. You know, the respect is at the all utmost highest level. You know, these guys were in, you know, federal institution, and were rubbing shoulders with John Gotti, you know, while he was in custody. So you had
But
to,
not everybody thinks they deserve respect.
meaning,
other officers maybe, or the people in this community think these guys are bad guys. Why should they get respect?
Yeah, yeah. But you know, the guys that were working in that unit were handpicked guys, meaning, hey, they were more mature. They were more.
Right.
They knew the level of convict that were in there, because these are professional convicts. You know, like I mentioned earlier. You know, when they were probably growing up, their parents said, hey, be the best at what you do. These guys chose to be at the highest level of the Aryan Brotherhood or the Mexican Mafia, so they're all in. Like, you're all in the game that the profession that you're in. This is their profession. This is their platform. This is where they want to be, you know, in life. So you got to respect that. You know, I respected that to the highest level, because now this isn't a game. You know, I mean, now if these guys wanted to touch you and your family on the outside, they were going to touch your family up from the out in the outside. So you're playing a very dangerous game, not only with yourself, you're playing a very dangerous game with your family. Yeah, if they wanted to reach out and touch a family member of yours, they have the power to do that. So you're playing a very dangerous game with these gentlemen, you know. So the kind of like how Chuck said, you know, that respecting, you got to learn that real quick. And if you don't have that ingrained inside of you, then you're playing a very dangerous game with these guys. And you know, I learned so much from the convicts that were there, you know, um, on I on how to carry yourself, on, you know, how to talk, how to walk. You know, I was having a these individuals were a three deputy escort. So every time you moved them from one place to another, there was three deputies involved in it. There was two at the side and one behind. So I remember we did an escort one day, and you know, I was on one side, there was another Hispanic deputy on the other side, and there was a Hispanic deputy behind me. So I was communicating in Spanish with the deputy on the other side. So the guy that we were escorting was an Aryan Brotherhood brother, you know, and he looked back over at me and responded in Spanish, saying, "Hey, I know exactly what you're saying." So I asked him. I said, "Hey, Stenson," his name was Stenson, last name was Stenson. I said, "Hey, Stenson, where did you learn Spanish?" And he says, "Hey, Garcia, I was locked down in Pelican Bay for like 25 years. The guy to the right of me and the left of me both spoke Spanish, so I had to learn Spanish." But
Yeah.
that's how smart these guys are, you know.
Yeah.
And for whatever crimes they did, you know, or and for whatever what they did, you know, I'm not, you know, glorifying these guys, you know, but I had to work with them, you know, and I've learned, you know, a different level of respect on that end. You know, I mean, they were in there for whatever they did. You know, it was my job to facilitate their day to day and do that, but that was my job at the time. But it's just another level of respect. So I don't want people to kind of hear like, oh, I respect the shit out of these guys, you know. But that's the business that they were in. It's just a
Well,
very tricky. It's a very tricky business that, you know, you got to carry some type of mutual respect, because they respected you as a police officer because of the way you carry yourself.
Mm.
And for uh some way, you know, I respect them back because they were at the top level of being a convict. So
But there was deputies that didn't understand the way you rolled and the way you did business every day, right?
yeah, yeah, no, what 100% true. You know, that it's,
one of
you
the
know,
things, Ange, one of the things,
yeah,
real quick, is that you know it's really clear, knowing you and knowing some of the stories, that you know it's not necessarily the respect for the criminals for their criminal behavior, but you got to know the rules of the game. And once you enter into the playing field, which is the jail in that situation, you have to have respect for the game. You know, and I those criminals in a bad situation on the outside wouldn't have the same respect for you. They'd kill you in a heartbeat. But the rules of the game are different when you're on the inside. So respecting the game is important in any aspect of things. And I think that that's the beauty of how you survive, or at least me, under my understanding of how the officers survive in those high powered units in the jail, by understanding that kind of level of respect. And you know, getting it from them is just as important as giving it to them, to your daily survival. So
yeah, no, 100%. I'm glad you made that point, Chuck. You got to know your playing field. You know, it's like anything else. At that level, it's a controlled environment, and it's a very close environment. So it's kind of like a give and take. You got to give and take, and you got to watch yourself too, because I mean these guys, they're like lawyers. They know their rights like the back of their hand, better than probably you, and better than the people that wrote the handbook on their rights. So you got to be very, very tactical and very strategic with dealing with them. And at that level, at time, I was out, I was at the top of my game in that jail, and kind of making sure that every situation there at the facility, dealing with those guys didn't affect the rest of the facility. Because if these guys wanted, a riot, or they wanted something to jump off at the jail, they could make it happen with one kite, which is one note to the rest of the facility, and that facility would be a mess. So the most important thing is to keep these guys, you know, facilitated correctly, uh, getting them what what the right thing is to do to get them, as far as knowing their rights. If they had something coming to them, that was under the rules, and that everything was status quo. And if they were happy, the commanders and the staff were happy there, and the jail ran smooth, because you didn't want any of the other deputies, you know uh to get involved in an incident. So if these guys were happy and everything was running smooth, and if you had to say, sir and thank you and stuff like that, I think sometimes people, in Tommy's kind of perspective, is like, why are you calling that guy sir? He's a piece of shit.
Right.
And
Right.
you got to kind of like look at him and say, no, this is the piece of shit that'll take your family completely out. So you have to have that. You have to have that different type of 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 deputy working those type of units that could handle that type of responsibility, and knowing what they're getting themselves into, and not bowing down to them. So
Did you
that's
see
like
them?
a
Did you see them? They knew who they could manipulate. Did you see the weakness in some officers' games that they became the targets of who they tried to manipulate?
Right.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Chuck, because that's all it is. It's a manipulation game. I mean, I would walk in there and they'd say, "Oh, hey, Deputy Garcia, you have such a tight haircut. Have you been working out? Hey, your shoes are so polished." So they're kind of grooming you. They're kind of like, polishing your ego and saying, and you're like, "Oh man," like putting you on a pedestal. And I think the maturity level at that time was like, hey, and working with these guys from the Mexican mafia and the AB, they knew like, hey, you're not going to be able to manipulate this guy. This guy's on his game. And if you needed to talk to him, or if you needed something, they would pull me off to the side and say, hey, Garcia, my daughter's coming in from up north. Can I get an extra click? And sometimes you got to give and take. Sometimes you got to say, hey, yeah, no problem. Your daughter's coming from up north. You've been an ideal convict here at the jail. I mean, you're at the toppest level in the AB or the Mexican mafia. A click isn't going to make anything go wrong. So little things like that you could kind of control in that environment, where you're not stepping over the line, would be fine. And
Mhm.
sometimes you'd have to go back and say, hey, you know what, we got to turn the TVs off for this. We'll give you some extra TV time over here. So not like you're making a deal with the devil, but you are kind of making a deal with the devil, with kind of like, you know hey, it's a working environment. As I mean, those that haven't worked the jail won't get it. Those that have worked the jail will totally understand, because this is the guys that you're dealing with day in and day out. So you get to know their personalities, and you know what could say and what you can't say. So
I,
but with other deputies, they would see that and they would be like, "Man, you're kissing their asses.
uh,
You're bowing down to these guys. You're you're one of them." I got even accused of being one of them. Being one of the rolling with that outfit or organization. But you know, I mean, it was just their immaturity, their insecurity. Some of these guys would rather speak to me than speak to them, because they trusted me. They understood that you know uh, there's certain deputies in that facility that would get things done, or that they had influence on some of the stuff that went on there. So um,
You got me nervous now, Angel. I want to say that to all the shot callers out there, I respect your professional. I don't want anybody to think that I
I
well,
don't think
I'm with you.
that
I'm just
I
speaking
don't think anybody
globally.
would be surprised. I don't think anybody would be surprised, Tom, that that's the way the general public feels. And
Yeah,
again,
that's what I was doing.
unless
I was being the
you're
general
in the
public.
game,
Yeah,
you don't have to play by those rules. Like
right.
yeah,
Right.
I don't have to go into the jail. So I can tell you that I don't respect your game because you're a criminal and
Yeah.
you steal from people that I know. But if you're in the game, it's a whole different story.
Yeah.
And you brought up a great transition because you said that they accused you of being down for the for the criminal side of things because you got along. So I know that there's this term us and them that kind of fits into that kind of thought process in a lot of ways. The us and them um, in the aspect of being the criminal and being the authorities, and then also within the police department, there was kind of an us and them kind of concept as well. Would you mind talking about that a little bit and tell us where that came from and what that means?
yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, Chuck. The whole us and them thing just means, it started back with a group of different, kind of like a brotherhood at St. Paul, and we're sitting around and we're reading an article, back in the 60s, back in the Watts riots. A lady wrote an article for the Times that said us and them. It's basically us police against the inner city there in Watts. So there's some police officers that take the job, and they're giving tickets out to the soccer mom driving her kids down to the soccer game and stuff like that. And the us was, hey, we're going out and we're getting guns and we're getting dope, and we're chasing the real bad guys off the street. So it started off as a brotherhood from guys from and gals from different departments that we would just hang out, and we would tell stories and we would reflect on life and some of the things that we were going through. So it was kind of like an escape that kind of like looking back, just guys that you could talk to that had the same vision, had the same thoughts. Like, hey, you know what, I'll give that soccer mom a warning, but if you saw you know Psycho, walking down the street with an AK, you'd look the other way, and because you're afraid of that. Where
Mm.
the us part, that would be the them part. They would take a glance, look at the gangster, and head the other way. The us would engage, but you really have to have that fight or flight, in life. Either you're going to fight or you're going to fly, because whatever your instincts of just being afraid. A lot of people could say, hey, I'm going to engage and I'm going to do this, or not until you're in engagement, whether you're fighting on the football field, or you're taking those bad hits, or you're engaged in a fight with some of these guys, and you're like, man, I'm fighting now, and if I get punched in the nose and get knocked out, this guy's going to take my gun and kill me.
Mm.
So you really have to have that engagement, that either you're gonna stay and you're gonna fight, or you're going to fly. So
I've
that's where
heard
that
those
whole,
guys say. I've heard the guys say there's gunshots. Some people go to the gunshots. Some people go away from the gunshots. And
yeah,
that could be officers as well. That's crazy.
yeah. So that,
My dad told the story, Angel, of just about back in the day. He goes, you got a new rookie to go right along with you, and you were taking
That's
him
right.
out on the road, and the first thing you did was took him out and got him in a fight to see if he could hang. And he goes, there was no two ways about it. You either had to be able to engage, and that was one of the ways that he explained the job back then is we were chasing crime.
Hunting.
We were we were out looking for it, and we were chasing it down, and we were looking high and low to find the crime. We weren't just riding around waiting for a call. That was the way you got evaluated. That was the way. And he said, and he goes, if you didn't get in a fight at least once or twice a day, the cops around you, and again, it's that us and them mentality, was the guys around you would go, you're not doing your job. You're not a guy we can trust. And it kind of emulates the things that you're talking about now.
yeah. And so that's where it got started. Just just that way, and it just kind of blossomed and it kind of grew. And for me, that the whole us and them, in telling our story was, growing up in a gang infested area in East LA and having some of your cousins and uncles and some of these notorious East LA and Pico Rivera gangs, and seeing them fight with the cops and stuff like that. So you're kind of divided. You're kind of divided because you're like, it's kind of like how Matt put that post together for that us and them, deep down inside, you're half of you is a cop and half of you understands the other side of crime and understands that lifestyle of being a gangster or being a mobster. And a lot of people don't understand that. They're like, hey, and they probably won't never understand because they haven't walked in my boots or your boots or your father's boots and stuff like that, or even some of the people that are currently working the job, and I probably don't understand right now walking in their boots because they're like, hey, the game has changed. The game has solely changed. But for me, and I'll tell you a quick story. I remember when I was a little kid, and I tell it in the us and them story, you know, going down to my grandma's house over in Pico Rivera on Orange Street, and having some of my uncles that are from a notorious, Pico Rivera gang called Jardín, and us being there for a family gathering and seeing, my uncles out in the middle of the street on Orange Street, kind of going back and forth with the cops and the cops taking out their batons and then fighting with the cops. Like we're talking old school, fists to cuffs and batons and saps and just it was a melee, and it was me, and I remember it very clearly. And we're out in the front yard, and there was a fence, one of the old school fences there. And I looked over at my dad, and I said, "Hey, Dad, you know, are you going to go and help your brothers?" And my dad said, I love my brothers, but they're on their own. I got to take care of you guys, you know.
Mm.
And it was fisticuffs. And I remember very clearly looking at my dad and saying, "Hey, they're grown men. That's the path that they're deciding. I got to take care of you kids." We
Wow.
went back in the house, and those guys got hemmed up and cuffed up and taken to jail and stuff like that, and charges and stuff like that. And my dad said, "Hey, you know what? At some point, even though they're his brothers, he didn't go and chase those guys. That's the path that they took in life. That's the path that they're taking in life." And I remember that very clearly, kind of looking at him and him saying, "No, I got to take care of you boys. Let's get back inside the house." you know so with the whole us and them thing, it for me, it just really comes down to being split in half, understanding the streets and understanding the gang mentality and the convict mentality, but still having that heart in place with understanding the police officer mentality and some of the struggles that he goes through day in and day out of being disrespected and being called names and being spat at, and just understanding that portion on the streets, at 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, when no one's really looking on what takes place while you're comfortably at home, or while we're comfortably at home asleep and being safe. What some of those guys are going through, what some of those guys are looking for, they're looking to keep you safe. So that's why I say I tip my hat to these guys and gals that are currently doing the job, because they're under so much scrutiny. If they make one bad call, they're going to be on national news. So kind of like how you said, you got to understand the game, and the game has changed. The game has changed completely. I mean, the game changed when your dad was working, when I was working in the 90s, and where we're at now in life. So you can't, a lot of people scrutinize police officers now, but I mean, in my heart, in my soul, and when I leave, I understand their struggles and I understand where they're coming from. And 99.9% of those guys and gals that are doing the job, I tip my hat off to them, because you guys, I mean, for everything that you're under, you're doing a phenomenal job with keeping us safe. So big shout out um, to them.
Angel, I think that that duality of the the tough side, the us and them, the police side, the gang side, the criminal side, and understanding those things is recipe for success, I would think, in the job. To understand, you can probably make a lot more arrests and be involved in a lot more things if you are that, and if you understand that mentality. But there's a certain aspect of being a hard charger, which is the term that guys that I know use, um, that creates a lot of animosity within the department. It creates a lot of animosity with the way that people do their jobs. can you talk a little bit about that? Because, there's a certain aspect of we're leading up to a point where, you stopped doing this job. How did that evolve, and what was going on throughout the job that, that those things transpired?
Yeah, so you're gonna have a bunch of haters with whatever you do. If you're at the top of the game, you're gonna have like, how is he getting so many guns off the street? How is he getting so much dope off the streets? Why do these Mexican mafia or Aryan brotherhoods just want to talk to him? What is he doing? Is he with them, or where's he getting his intel from, or is he planting guns on and dope on people? So a lot of that's where that us and them comes through. Is kind of like, hey, that you're dealing with a high caliber police officer, that's going out there and has a niche for finding things, and has great informants. I had some great informants in the jail, out of the jail, but it's, once again, it's building up those bonds, it's building up those relationships. If these guys trust you and you're talking their game, I had a conversation with Henry Sanchez. It's kind of like, hey, if they know that you're legit, and they know that they could trust you, um, to a certain amount, they're going to tell you everything. People love to talk. People want to want to be heard. So and I wouldn't say manipulate these guys, but just being straight, and taking your gloves off and saying, hey, I'm legit. Like, what's going on here? Like, what can I do to help you, and how can you help me? In helping them, they might be asking for, hey, you know what? I haven't fed my kids in a few days. Hey, no problem. I'll go get them groceries and bring it to them. But I think that disconnect, like, oh, I'm doing something for this informant, I'm bringing groceries to his family because his kids aren't eating. It's just a whole different level,
Yeah.
and back in those days, you'd be able to get away with some of that stuff. Like, hey, man, I need $20 to grab a burger. Well, let's just go get you a burger. I remember, you know, sitting there and listening to a guy confess, like totally confess on why he did what he did. He was already convicted of a crime, and he was already sentenced, so he was already going upstate. But it he gave me a scenario on what would you do, if someone did something to your daughter,
Yeah.
and at the end of the conversation with him, I was like, wow, like, what a powerful story that this guy told me. And I tell the story all the time. It's just what would you do? What would you do in a situation? Because even as good people that we are, sometimes, we do bad things for the right reasons, whatever they are.
Did you get did eventually? And I've heard a lot of people talk about this. Is that eventually the hard chargers though create resentment within the ranks? They create um, the brass who doesn't back them up. Lives off all the statistics of how well you guys do, and then doesn't back them up when the shit hits the fan. I mean, seems like there would be a lot of resentment that would start to build up, creating even more of an us and them kind of a feeling.
Yeah, we did have that, and we do have that. I don't know how it's going nowadays. I know nowadays, everything is just so buckled down and tied down. You don't hear too much of the stuff because they keep it internally, because they don't want it to be on the front page or of the local newspaper or nationally. But in my situation, it was a very different kind of situation, dealing with family, dealing with the police department. Um, you know, uh, um, it was just a very different, scenario. Even some of the internal affairs sergeants that were dealing in my situation said, "Hey, you're in a bad spot." So um, they had a piece of them that was, it's kind of like anything else. If a family member puts you in a bad spot, like, what do? Do you go with them, or do you go with your family? I chose to go with my family, and um I guess, walk away or be disconnected from the department, and stick with my family. And I think that was a great choice that I made, because in the long run, that's all you have is your family. I mean, it was a career, it was a job, but just walking away from from that type of situation and dealing with the situation within my family. I think, build up a stronger bond with my family, internally.
I'm
So
very confused by the whole thing.
Can you
Honestly, I don't.
pause for a second, Tom?
Okay. So the concern that I have, or the confusion that I have, being quote unquote citizen. I know Chuck's dad was an officer, and you're an officer. I'm the one that's not an officer. My mom was a police dispatcher, but I didn't really, I don't really, I didn't embrace all that stuff. But what I don't understand coming from coaching is I will do everything I can to have the kids or the players at the top of their game, even if I have to go to the kids that aren't at the top of the game, encourage them to get to the top of their game, and also make them respect and love the guys that are at the top of the game. Like I don't understand this fascination with, we got to, Chuck was talking about hard chargers. Seems like that's what you want. Guy like you getting stuff off the street, seems like that's what you want. A guy like you talking to people, keeping the jail from exploding, seems like that's what you want. And yet we have these quote unquote shot callers and these admin types that are just trying, they're so afraid at that level. They don't trust you. They don't trust Mr. Willig. They don't trust. It's just devastating to me. I just don't understand there. So essentially in my math, we don't have the best people for the job doing the job. And to me, that doesn't, to me, that's why we have this situation we have now, where cops aren't being respected, and there's a breakdown in society. The politicians are criminals. The cops are criminals. Everyone's freaking criminals. You know what, man? You gotta have brass balls to be an administrator. I gotta believe that you're gonna make good decisions. If you don't make good
well, it
decisions,
it all comes down, Tommy. Is I mean, the administrator's looking at it in a liability point, at like an aspect,
but that's
and the
not the job
administrator.
description. The job description is to keep people safe and keep the streets
I
clean.
get it. No, I
Stop.
get it.
Yeah.
I get it. I get
Yeah.
it. But everyone has their own agenda. So that administrator, he's looking at, hey, what's the next level for me? So if he's a commander, he wants to be a chief. So he's looking at, hey, if nothing happens on my watch, if you don't have that hard charger that's on, Channel 4 News, during a police chase, going 120 miles down the 5 freeway, and there's a shooting, then that administrator at home or in his office saying, man, not on my watch. Because if he
But
makes
they
a
get
bad
the
choice,
promotion because of you. They get the promotion because of the numbers. They
I
get
get
the
it.
promotion.
I get it. I totally get it. But he's looking at it for job,
Oh man.
career sake, So he's looking, if something happens on my watch, or if you have this real hard charger that's always getting into shootings, that's always getting on his, he's like, hey, the way he sees it is like, man, this guy's, all he attracts is shit.
And
All he,
Mr. Willig says, Sergeant Willig says, we know you're a good cop. We know you're doing the job. You write so many tickets, you arrest enough people. We know you're working. That is the indicator.
But he also got mass transferred,
Yeah.
with his group of guys several times, where they said you all got to go because
Yeah.
you're you,
No,
you
I
guys
know.
together you guys together are an issue. But I think that's the nature of the game too, though, is that that to me that garners a lot of respect for the guys that do the job well, because it's tough. I will Leonard Mora is a guy that we're going to have on soon, and Leonard was a part of the Christopher Commission, and on the list of guys with the most beefs of violence or physical interactions or altercations and stuff. And those guys were doing the job, and it's the same thing that Angel's talking about, I think, is
Yeah, man.
it's tough. It's a tough job, but in its easiest sense.
I
So.
want that. I mean, I guess I want the people to know that, whoever's listening, I want them to understand. When I watch Jack Nicholson say, "You want me on the wall," you can sleep at night because I'm protecting you. You have to let me do what I do. You have to let me be true to my nature. You have to let me be the scorpion riding on the back of the frog. Like you have to let me be me. I'm the sheepdog. Like I don't understand. I mean, I guess that gets into a fuzzy zone where you can lose your mind a little bit. Ultimate power corrupts, right? But I I don't know, man. Nobody's taking that job because they want to be bad. They take the job because they want good. You
Well,
know, I mean, it was
that's
very clear talking to Mr. Willig. It was bad guys and good guys. That's it. I don't care. He wasn't even offended by it. He's like, yeah, I know there's bad guys, and I just gotta go get them. We gotta go hunt them. I know that's a harsh word. I just loved his conversation. I was so valuable, and here, and I'm getting it the same from you, and I just feel so much more empowered as a citizen now. I'm going, wow, these guys. I hope that's what
Let,
everybody's getting out of
let
this.
me ask you this question, Angel. To go out and do that job, you're physically fighting, you're emotionally fighting, you're going home and trying to lead some semblance of a normal life with with your family or with your friends or whatever. And the lines must get blurred, with that, to live that warrior lifestyle. It must be hard to stay on the right side of the law and have to make those decisions in your head all the time about staying on the right side of things. Is that something that you've experienced?
You know what? And kind of like how you said, the front line of leadership, which would be your sergeant, you know, um, big props to them because they kind of, you know, empower you to go out there and do that. And that, if you have a strong sergeant for your shift that's saying, hey, let's go out there and let's see how many people we could see how many bad guys we could take to jail tonight. Let's keep our citizens, safe and go out there. And it's like anything else, very very smart uh sergeants and leaderships on different shifts that you had, and some you respected more, and some you're like, hey man, I don't know how this guy became a sergeant. Not I'm not bad mouthing some of these guys, but I mean the good ones are the ones you gravitate to, and you kind of stay on their shift because they have a game plan and they're strategic at what they do, and they were the best at what they did when they were in the position that you were in. So I mean, it's I had one sergeant that was absolutely a great leader. You know how you have great leadership on a football field. He was a great leadership in that business, with having formulating a game plan for that night, doing graphics and statistics on saying, hey, you know what, in this area between this time and this time, strategically placing the police officers in that area to, prevent, burglaries, car burglaries, mail burglaries, home burglaries while you're asleep. And we took a lot of bad guys to jail like that because I mean, the guy was a very smart, intelligent, strategic guy, and you got to give big props to guys like that. But it's kind of like anything else. What you put into it and how strategically you are, and what type of leader that you are, is going to reflect on the guys that you have and gals that you have on your team at that level. So, if I can answer your question, is that strategically placing people in the right positions or in the right place to combat and keep you safe at night, you know, um, and he would take care of some of the beefs that you got. People would call in and say, "Hey, your guy pulled me over at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was coming home from work. Yeah, but you had a busted tail light." He's just doing his job to make sure that the other people in that area are safe, because we've been having a lot of burglaries there. You know what I mean? So you would have the probable cause, you would have the interaction. But if you're a citizen just getting home at 3 o'clock in the morning from work, hey, thank you very much, fix that tail light, and you'd send them on their way. But where you start getting in the pickle is when you have those, criminals at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're pulling them over, and they're saying, well, why are you harassing me at 3 o'clock in the morning? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Because you're stealing people's mails, because you're breaking into people's cars, because your whole back trunk is full of stereos and purses and stuff like that, and now we're harassing you because you're a criminal.
Right.
You're the bad guy, and back in the days, kind of like how you said earlier, a criminal would take his thumps, would take his charges, because he got caught. You know, maybe he got away with it 100 times, but this one time he got caught, so his hands are up, saying, "Hey, I'm an old school guy. You caught me. I'm going to jail." But nowadays, even the criminals are, they feel entitled, because why are you harassing them? Why are you pulling them over? Well, if you follow what the police officer's saying, keep your hands up, get on the curb, blah blah, well, I know my rights and I know this, I know that's fine, but that's not the time and place to get into all that. Hey, let's just make sure we're all safe. Let's make sure we got this. And You know, there's been plenty of times of dusting someone off and saying, "Hey, man, I apologize. I'm so sorry. Here's my card. If I could ever do a solid for you, you let me know." You know, but
Nice.
nowadays, you know, people are afraid. People are afraid to interact with the cop. People are afraid to come up. You know, I mean, back in the days, I was going into these hardcore neighborhoods and talking to, you know, Joker, and talking to all these gangsters, and talking to their families, and talking to their kids, you know, and bringing a toy during Christmas, and giving it to them, you know, and they were like, are you serious? You're giving my son a toy? Like, yeah. What does your kid have to do with the business that we're in? You know, it has nothing to do with your kid, you know. And then that's where you get that respect. That's where you start formulating that respect, you know, being able to go knock on the door and talk to the grandma and saying, "Hey, have you seen Joe? Because they're after him for a crime that he committed. You know what, I'll get a hold of Joe and I'll bring him down to the police station this afternoon." You know, forming those relationships and having that reputation, not only in the jail but out in the streets, that, hey, you know, that guy, he's a real guy, and if you need to talk to him, he could talk to you, you know. um, Kind of like they say, hey, we don't need tough guys. We have enough tough guys in this world. We need smart guys, smart
Nice.
people that are intelligent, that
Here.
that know how to that know how to form those bonds and those relationships with anyone. You know, I mean, uh, uh, people look down at the, you know, the people that are cleaning your house, your janitor. I treat them the best. You know, my mom cleaned houses for, you know, she still cleans houses. You know, I formed those relationships with those janitors, or with the people that come, that because those are essential services that you need, and those are some of the best people that that you learn from, because they've gone through the trenches. So, I mean, it's just a little differently with me, and it all comes back to relationships. You know, the old school way of community policing. You know, I worked for a department of Norwalk Public Safety. There was a director by the name of Kevin Gaino, rest in peace. He passed away, but I mean, he received national awards for community oriented policing, having that bond with your community, you know. And I mean, you mentioned it earlier, Chuck, you know, with technology and the internet and everything, life is moving so fast. But I mean, if we take a step back, you know, and just have mutual respect, and learning each other's culture, you know, the Hispanic culture is way different from the white culture, and way different from the Cambodian culture or Vietnamese culture. But if you take a step back and learn different cultures, and embrace different cultures, and embrace people's, you know, the way they do things, and have that in the back of your head, and be more diverse in that, it just makes you a better person. And not only that, but it makes you a better police officer, because if you're walking into a Hispanic culture, you don't start doing something that maybe you're not supposed to. And it's like, oh, well, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Well, you're going to have a real hard time in life with anything that you do, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I think the first thing I'd like to say is it's been a great couple hours with you, Angel, and I'd love to have you come back on for a part two, because I think there's a lot of stories and conversations to still have. You talked a lot about leadership, and I think you know, we do a coach's corner on Tuesdays that I think that, you know, talking about some leadership with you would be fantastic, and hearing your feelings about that. And um, I think that you know, if we can wrap it up with we usually go through some quick questions and some cool little things to kind of get an insight into your personality and stuff. And you know, we can finish up with that. Then we can have you come back on and do another couple hours with us. But
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
You'll
Would
come
love
yeah,
back
to.
that'd
on,
be
right? Because I'm not letting you go unless you're gonna unless you say
Yeah,
no.
no,
Okay.
we still got we still got to talk about family stuff, and Brianna,
Yes,
and
of course.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
fatherhood and
important.
stuff like that.
Oh
I'd really
my
love to
God.
talk about fatherhood when she was
Right.
born. So I'd really love to
Yeah,
talk
I
about that.
think that would be really cool. We will do
Girl
that for
dad,
sure.
girl dad.
All right, you got it, Tom. Go ahead.
Okay,
Let's jump in.
just some quick ones. We won't comment. You know, you just say what you need to say, short or long,
Yep.
don't matter.
Yep.
Okay. One person who made an impact on your life that doesn't know it.
Definitely. I don't know if she knows it or not, but my mother, by far, uh, biggest impact in my life is never to quit in life.
Nice. Nice. Things every young man should know, or a thing.
A young man should know that.
If you want to be a man, what's the one thing you should know?
I guess my question to be is keep quiet, don't say a word, and listen to the what a wise man has to say.
Nice. I like that. Two ears, one mouth. Good deal. What would you like to be known for in 50 years?
That's a good question, Tommy. Uh, I think there's two parts to this. The first part is just being humble. I've had a very beautiful life. I've had a very beautiful family, very beautiful friends. Some loyal soldiers and acquaintances that at a drop of the dime, they have my backs here, no matter what, no matter what time. But that mutual love and respect that you get coming from a brother, you know, uh, is something that people kind of lose throughout the way. So that respect and loyalty, and just being humble and kind to people, and always give back. I've been very fortunate to give back to my family and friends,
Absolutely.
and giving back has been, one of my greatest uh, features in life, and one of the things that I'd love to be known for is cooking.
Yeah.
Since a good friend since a good friend of mine always would say, there's not that many Angel Garcias left in this world.
Right.
Thank you for being my friend. And Joe would always say that, you're one of a kind. And I would always kind of like
Yeah.
say,
Food is
I
love,
would
bro.
I would think back and I was like, is this guy like, is he stroking my ego? And I would tell him like, hey, dude, like, are you fucking with me? Like, are you stroking my ego? And he's like, no, like, that's how I really feel. Cause you never knew what Joe, like, was he messing around? Was he being honest?
That's true.
So I would tell him, hey, are
Yeah.
you fucking with me? And he's like, no, like, you're one of a kind. So I think I've embraced, and I've even, taken it up a notch with my cooking, just to keep his light and his spirit lit up in
Nice.
in my world. And I know this is a long answer, and my baby right now, Brianna Irene Garcia, will sit there and she'll tell me, Papa, tell me a story. So we lay down, we just find a place on the carpet and we lay down, and she snuggles up under my arm, and I start talking about Big Daddy Joe. I said, well, what do you want a story of? And she's like, tell me a story about Big Daddy Joe, and I'll tell her a great story of Big Daddy Joe. But man, that's what I would love to be known for. So I mean, like I'm passing on my friend's reputation and his spirit. That's what I would love to be known for. Is like, man, we had some great laughs and some great dinners over at Angels, and that's all you have to give. You're not going to take the big houses and big cars and big money with you.
Well, why do you think I moved to Corona? So I could be close, ready at a moment's notice, and get a meal from time to time. Pretty good
There
deal.
you go. There you go.
All
I'm
right,
cooking ribs tonight.
last one of this section, real quick. If you had Jeff Bezos money, what would you spend it on to make your country or community stronger? Where should the money go,
And
Ange?
I would really give it back to the community. I think, if I had all the money in the world, I would set up, community policing oriented, centers, throughout, North America, and name them uh, different officers that have given up the ultimate sacrifice, and call them, the different centers, and just get back. I think that disconnect with the community is lost, and needs to be gained back, and that respect needs to come back. It just needs to be there to make all of our communities safe throughout the world.
Mm,
Nice.
nice. All right, we're gonna do a speed round here, real quick. Now it's just an either or situation. I'm gonna give you two things, and you tell me which one you prefer. Okay.
Okay.
All right. First one: Elvis or Jerry Lee Lewis?
Elvis.
Beatles or Stones?
Stones.
Chuck D or LL Cool J?
Oh, that's a good one. Chuck D.
Ford or Chevy?
Chevy.
Coke or Pepsi?
Oh, Coke.
Whiskey or tequila?
Whiskey.
Android or iOS?
iOS.
Baseball or football?
Football.
Blonde or brunette?
Brunette.
J-Lo or Selma?
Oh, Selma.
Batman or Superman?
That's a good one, man. I'd go with Batman.
Yeah, world's greatest detective.
Yeah.
World War II or Vietnam?
World War II.
And the last one, Vin or Chick? Vin Scully or Chick Hearns?
Oh man, that's a tough one, dude.
This is the LA question base, right?
Those are good. Those are good ones. Man, I'd go with Chuck, man.
Okay. Chick Hearns?
Chick.
Right
Yeah,
I'd go with
Chick.
I'd
That's
go
it
with
for
Chick,
me.
yeah.
No more pressure.
That's fantastic. Well, thanks again, Ange, for being with us. And like I said, we will come back and schedule a round two and talk about some things a little more in depth. But man, it's great to be able to spend a couple hours with you and catch up and hear your points of view. And I think the people listening will definitely gain some insight and wisdom from hearing what you had to say. And like always, man, love you, brother, and can't wait to get back and get rid of some of this COVID stuff so we can start sitting down and having some meals and doing what we getting out and visiting a little bit. But thanks so much, Angel. We really appreciate you being here, man.
Yeah, much love and respect for you guys. Love you guys. All right, bye bye.
See ya.
All right, man.